days of no excuse voting hasn't been around at all until November of 2020. So, I mean, reasonably, if you're coming out to Food Line to get groceries, you could swing in, cast your vote, and be done, and not have to worry about election day if that's something that you wanted to do. We know that people like it because truly 30%. I mean, Virginia was given a projection when early voting started of what we were expected to see in 3 years, and we smashed through it the first year and have been consistent at 30%, which is what we're supposed to reach by year 3. So Madison definitely comes out early, participates, shows up for it. But I understand either way. However you guys.
I don't think that they mind traveling.
Right. Sure.
Because it's Madison's not that big of a county in the
Right.
first place. I think it's just the principle of keeping it where it is.
Okay.
Questions, comments, gentlemen?
Do you foresee the early voting staying?
Yeah, I think early voting is definitely here to stay. When Virginia brought it in 2020, they went from having no early voting to early voting for the longest in the country. 45 days is the longest that it's offered anywhere. We've seen, like I said, great turnouts. There are bills and whatnot where they've talked about reducing it from 45 days. I don't necessarily see them going through, but if they could, it's still always going to be here, just maybe not for 45 days.
And forgive me, we can't have one machine in there? I don't know, I'm asking.
In the early voting site. So the reason that we have to have 2 now is that the results have to be reported separately for the people who vote by mail and the people who vote in person. Previously, we always used the same machine until this past November, and they changed the ruling because they want results separately for how the by-mail voters are voting and how the in-person voters are voting, and that's the only reason that we need 2 machines.
I'm like Charlotte, I've heard from Grace Mill quite a bit.
Mhm.
I definitely want to preserve the history.
Sure.
Mr. Jewett?
Well, I agree. If we're worried about election accessibility and election integrity, I think that the logical course of action is to retain the precinct, but purchase any additional voting machines that we need to have. We have to spend $10,000 to do that. I guess that's actually a small price to pay for election integrity. That's my opinion.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, let's see. I don't mean to put a target on anybody's back, but who's on the electoral board? So if they're here, any of them here, I'd like to.
So
That's
this is,
3 people on the electoral board?
it is. The secretary is 6, so she was unable to make it, but this is Annette Hyde and Larry Thomas, who are both new members.
So the secretary is not a member.
Yes.
She is, yes.
There are 3 voting members or 4 voting members?
3.
Who's the secretary?
Margaret Douglas.
Okay.
So it's Larry, Annette, and who's the 3rd voting
Margaret
member?
Douglas.
Margaret Douglas?
Mm-hmm.
And we've got 2 out of the 3 tonight, okay. Let's see. I got it backwards here. So, Mr. Smith brought up, the redundancy issue. Are you saying that redundancy is a nice to have, or is it a state requirement?
When you say redundancy, you mean like?
I guess having the backup machines at all.
So.
Do you need the $10,000 machine you're talking about? That would go to Graves Mill, right?
The machine, Grace Mill already has their own machine, so I need a second one for the absentee precinct or to use as a spare. We've kind of taken the spare and are using it as our second in the absentee precinct.
Okay.
And we really just need to replace that in case 2 machines were to go down on election
So the
day.
$10,000 machine has nothing to do with Graves Mill?
Other than if Graves Mill were to consolidate, that machine could be recycled and become that machine that we ultimately will have to buy.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha,
kind of used to the current machines that we have now. When do they plan on changing those and making them not work
We
anymore?
just did an upgrade to Windows 10 and should be good.
Alright,
yeah.
so we got at
He
least
was
another
just
year.
here like 2 weeks ago, upgraded everything to Windows 10. We're
Alright,
meeting all regulations and good to go.
good, so we got one more year.
And they're paid for,
Yeah.
so.
So, Lauren, with all due respect, I don't think you answered Charlotte's question about who started this. I mean, who started this thing as, oh, maybe we should do this? Is that you, when you were filling out your budget, or
So I
who
think
started it?
I asked for consolidation money from you all last year in our budget because the redistricting should have been further along by now, but the census numbers came in late and kind of pushed everything back. So we couldn't make any precinct consolidations or changes before getting the census information. And now we have that and the redistricting's begun, so I was trying to get it all done at one time if this was something we wanted to pursue. And it has been talked about in the past. I know of 2 times that it's come up to prior boards and wasn't pursued. So definitely just, really the only reason is the lack of voters there. Not that they don't turn out and that participation isn't great, but it's only 88 people and it's so much smaller than everything else that we have.
Alright, yes, sir. Alright, let's open up to mock public hearing, I guess. Who would like to say something about this? And if we could hand the mic around, Pete, please.
There's one right there.
Hold on, Pete, you mind going second? Mr. Lillard, do real quick. Thank you. Mr. Lillard?
Randall Lillard, Grace Mill. I've been there ever since I was in the first grade. Except my military time. And I was election official for a number of years. And we've always had the best percentage of registered voters voting. And one year we had 100%. And our numbers weren't as high then as they are now, but we're growing. Needless to say, I'm in favor of keeping our voting precinct.
Thank you, Mr. Lillard. Pete?
I wanna say, I don't, live in Grays Mill, but I have a lot of property in Grays Mill. And, it's great for what the guys that live in that area have done just to put the old post office back, fix up some of the history there. And in our comp plan, it says we wanna protect our historical. And I think that I think that doing away with this is just so unethical because of the history that's behind this place. No reason we should get rid of this place. And if it's an issue of the $1,300, I'll donate it.
Thank you, Pete. Who would like to go next? Yes, ma'am.
I had extended remarks, but I'm gonna read it for you. I hate to do this, I really do. My name is Larry Thomas. I was recently appointed to the electoral board. The first time I saw this proposal was less than a month after I was sworn in, at the first electoral board meeting. That meeting took place last Thursday, January 19th, less than a week ago. I was afforded no time to investigate the ramifications of it, much less give it basic deliberation, and I was asked to support it because it was urgent. The reasons were, 1, the registrar needs an extra machine for the central absentee precinct app in the registrar's office that receives early and absentee voting, some of which was mitigation for COVID restrictions. 2nd, the registrar may need an extra machine because the town of Madison may have to be established as its own precinct. That, she said, would need to apply for a waiver. Those were the issues that were presented to me. The solution for these problems was to merge the Wolftown and Grays Mill precincts and take the Grays Mill machine. The registrar's reason for pushing this kill 2 birds with 1 stone was to get this on the Board of Supervisors meeting agenda, tonight's agenda. The proposal explains it would be more efficient to notify Graves Mill residents of the merging of their precinct with Wolftown in the same meeting containing new registration cards, in the same mailing containing new registration cards, having to do with state redistricting. The assessment of the postage cost to notify 88 registered voters in Graves Mill in a separate letter, mailing, was told to me is going to be $5,000. Her estimated cost of a new machine at the time of her presentation to the electoral board was $15,000. The bargain price is now $10,000. Given only 4 business days, counting today before this meeting, I cannot support this proposal without more information. 1. COVID lockdowns are the exception, not the rule, and the inflated absentee ballot numbers are as well. The existing machine in the registrar's office filled the needs of the last election. 2 days after our vote, and she has clarified this evening that she needs 2 machines because she has to do separate counts. I'm wondering if you could possibly do the early voting counts first and then count the absentee ballots afterwards, but we'll go there later. 2 days after our vote on Friday, January 21st, the registrar notified me that a machine in the town wouldn't be needed for 2 years. At that time, she requested clarification about the need to create a town district from the Virginia Department of Elections. The response, which referenced the Office of the Attorney General, was that there's no need to create a town precinct or apply for a waiver. These were the reasons that were presented to me when I was asked for a vote. Okay. So here we are at square one with a howitzer aimed at a button buck for his rack, and we're not even hungry. Absent the need of the town precinct, we are reduced to a convoluted, complicated, and controversial proposal to kill a precinct for their voting machine and ostensibly save money so we can have redundancy for a need that might disappear in the near future. Granted, it wouldn't hurt to have an additional machine, but to impulsively, wantonly harvest a precinct that is iconic in the Commonwealth is of significant cultural, historic, symbolic value seems taking a bit over the bag limit. In the interest of efficiency and expediency, I would propose serious advanced research, taking direct aim, and submitting a budget request for another machine. That's my public comment. This will take a little bit longer, but it's worth it.
Free equipment.
If you have the time, I appreciate your patience. Embedded in this proposal is another agenda, to eliminate the Graves Mill precinct due to its small size. I can address the prospects of the Graves Mill community growing, having more registered voters. They have and they will. They have grown and they will. Or I could address whether or not more voting machines are needed here or there and the strategic necessities of voter access. These are things that are easily resolved without altering the map. A disruption that even legislators do only every decade. But I move to address something equally important. It's about priorities, timelines, respect for our citizenry, and foresight. It's about who we are and what we need. I've lived in Madison for over 42 years. I have to count because I came here. I've seen this before. I've formally researched and written about the heritage and culture of this community. I'm familiar with the history of eliminating Graves Mill precinct, and I know many of the voters in that precinct. If I think this proposal this time is rushed, I can only imagine what they think. Among the principles that the country was founded on is the idea that decisions should be seriously considered. Details should be addressed and changes should be slow. Making too many changes too quickly has been compared to radically shifting the rudder of a ship, creating conditions where the ship might capsize. On the national and state level, too many legislators, so-called, seem to have forgotten that principle. Just in the past year, nearly every aspect of our daily lives has been radically altered in the name of another emergency or shifting ideologies. Institutions the majority of our citizenry have historically trusted are ridiculed daily due to persistent efforts to pursue one agenda or another as opposed to serving the people. The integrity of the entire system by which we make our most valuable decisions and protect our right to entertain options and change, the electoral system, has been called into question. Because of redistricting, we've lost our congressman, our state senator, and our delegate. Due to changes in our calendar, we have to scurry to locate and elect new ones. We've even recently been subjected to historically stressful weather conditions. At some point, we must put the brakes on the chaos, and I believe this is one of those points. I'm one of the handful of people charged with the responsibility for election integrity, perhaps even restoring faith in that system. There may be legitimate reasons for this goal, but the means of reaching it are in question. Bringing this change to the floor at this time without more deliberation is premature and can only serve to disrupt and potentially alienate a special pocket of dedicated voters who take pride in the system. The story of Grays Mill Precinct is unfortunately an anomaly. That means it's out of the ordinary for those who need a dictionary. Their voter precipitation in the election was 75% in 2021, counting absentee ballots. In all the time I've been here, this pocket of residents has taken extreme pride in their precinct as a feature of their hamlet's culture and a symbol of their freedom. It's part of the fabric of this county that represents the commitment, community, and its roots reach back to the foundations of our country. It is not a mere matter of cost, redistricting, expediency, or efficiency. It's a precious remnant of what we used to call American. It's something that you can't buy. I don't care how much revenue you raise. You can't regulate it, no matter how many pages of red tape you generate. It's a phenomenon to be protected, held up as an example, cherished and preserved. It's a symbol of resolve that longtime Madisonian families look to as a reminder that we are a free and resilient people. It's a target for those who would dissolve our past in the name of modernity. They're drawn to it. It's a part of our history that the government is charged with protecting, whether or not it's included in the National Register of Historic Places. You can preserve the tangible place, but it takes forethought, insight, respect, and rigorous determination to preserve standards of character and virtue like those embodied in Grays Mill. Now is not the time to give proposals like this passing consideration for the sake of expediency or efficiency. I'm asking you to reject it because it lacks fundamental rational support. If you want to revisit it, save it for when the seas are calmer and you can give it adequate deliberation. Now is the time to reach out to dedicated citizens and encourage them proudly to cultivate that record participation rate. I'm sorry, my eyes are blurry, I can't see. Not dismantle one element of stability in their lives. If the issue, as it has been in the past, really is that Grays Mill has too few voters to justify its existence, there are other ways to address it. Most of all, Grays Mill residents should be included in the preliminary discussion. Clearly, this should have happened before this proposal was submitted. Given the size of Grays Mill Precinct has been a subject of historic discussion and questioning, but burying the plan to eliminate the precinct more than one reason is deceptive on its face. The entire Grays Mill challenge could be met by considering other options. There are voters in Fletcher, for example, who have to travel to Wolftown and then back to Grays Mill to vote because they used to travel a road that goes up to the bluff and down Kinsey Run. The road to the bluff from Fletcher still exists, but I don't think any of them want to travel it. I propose that those voters be included in the Wolftown precinct to save travel time for them. It's just a handful of people. In addition, perhaps in order to preserve the Grays Mill precinct, adding more of the Wolftown territory, say by including those north of the Rapidan and residing along the Grays Mill Road and its tributaries, which is adjacent to Grays Mill, and a simpler trip to Grays Mill precinct. Who was it? David Lewis said he used to live at Grays Mill Farm, which is about halfway between Grays Mill and the Rapidan River. He said it was easier to go to Grays Mill, but he was in Wolftown. He had to go to Wolftown. I realize that this complicates the alteration a bit, but it preserves the integrity of Grays Mill. This proposal, albeit more difficult to accomplish but simpler for those who live in the region, simply demonstrates that sufficient attention was not given to this issue in the time allowed, and there's more than one way to approach a perceived problem. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for putting up with my crappy reading.
Thank you, Larry. Other comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Mitch Bernstein. I'm a resident of Grays Mill. I'm sorry I missed some of the friends and neighbors earlier, all the comments that you were making. So I hope I'm not being repetitive. But I think I've been here for 35 years, which makes me a newcomer in Great Mill terms, and certainly Madison County terms. And I look at my friend the Lillards, who had a centennial farm. This was probably 20 years ago. But I think what I'd like to do is just to share with the board what it means to be a Grays Mill resident today. You know, because we've heard about its a historical resource, we've heard about its cultural significance, and these things are all true. But what makes it a special place is that it actually has a sense of community. And we've come together. Doug Graves maintains a listserv where local news is shared with everybody. There's a Christmas party, a holiday party every year. COVID notwithstanding, we've been meeting there since I can remember, as long as I can remember. And Grays Mill itself is resilient. When we moved here, there was not only the church that was there was a thrift store, there was a separate post office building, there were separate schoolhouses that were there that from the 1800s, all preserved. They were all wiped out by the flood. 9 years after we came. And yet everybody came back together, and the church, the center, was still the cultural center of our community. The holiday parties, as I say. We gathered there for the roadside cleanups that we would get together to do. We would have other, Doug put together, Mr. Graves, a fantastic historical exhibit 4 or 5 years ago about the history of Grays Mill, and everybody felt a part of that. And then what happened, the post office was relocated in the church to maintain that continuity. I think you're probably familiar with the fact that the Postal Service discontinued, basically closed the Grays Mill, separate post office back in, I don't remember the year. And we tried to stop it, we tried to appeal, turned out we were out of time. It came too late, the Postal Service. Nevertheless, that community remains centered in that place. Now, to take away our electoral, not rights, I understand it, but our sense of presence there, being able to walk, in some of our cases, down to the polling place, means a lot. It makes a big difference in the way that sense of community thrives. And I fear that if this proposal goes through, because a machine might be used as a spare in case it's needed somewhere else, it would really strike a blow into the heart of our community for no good reason. We've talked about, other people have talked about the finances and how it would work. And it's true. It's lost in the rounding, the amount of money that this would cost every year to do this. As for the machine, I understand and I appreciate Jewett's statement that you need a new machine, but invest in a new machine. But I have another proposal too. if it should turn out that you need that other machine somewhere else, and I know Lauren was talking about hand counting being brutal process. Not so hard to count 88 ballots. So you could have hand counting there if you needed a machine somewhere else. But you could maintain the fact that we have a community and we have our own electoral district. And that's about all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other comments? Other comments? Other comments?
Can I comment again?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'll be really quick, I promise. I just want to say that Graves Mill has always been a great precinct for us. Scooty's family supplies all the election officials. It's a beautiful church. They do a great job. I just wanted to come up and clarify a few things that Ms. Thomas said because it sounds like I'm a pretty big villain. $5,000 is not what I said it was going to cost to send out new voter cards. That's the cost for the whole county. So you're talking 10,000 registered voters. Graves Mill's cost in sending out new voter cards to 88 people is super minimal and not anything that would matter. I was just trying to cut down on confusion from sending a current card and then, a month later we consolidate and sending another one. Another clarification there is she made the comment that she was just introduced to this, but that's only because new electoral board members just started January 1st. So last week was our first board meeting, but this is something that we spent a lot of time on with the prior board. If Ms. Douglas was here, she could attest to that. But I've spent a lot of time on it, my staff has spent a lot of time on it. We don't take changes like this lightly, and I take my job very seriously. So